sometimes it's about the people. So much of what we do, I work from my house, right? And getting to go out and do a show with essentially my friends and my family, that's the thing that I like. I'm very blessed now that I can choose like what show I get to do. The way that they've designed the systems, Clearwing installs a remote monitoring computer for us. So I can log in if I needed to, and let's say that the client says, oh, hey, the time of day at 8 a.m. did not trigger today. Can you take a look at that? And so we actually can remotely monitor and remotely log in and make those little changes. In some ways, it doesn't feel like I'm freelance because I feel like I'm still doing so many of the things that I always did, whether I was teaching at the school or I was working at ETC, right? And yeah, it's freelance, but I don't really feel that way about it. I guess right now it's just I have more time.
Welcome to the Theater Art Life podcast. Today we are talking with Josh Selander.
Recently relocating back to Las Vegas, Josh most recently spent the last 8 years teaching lighting technology, design and programming at University of North Carolina School of the Arts. Prior to arriving at UNCSA, Selander was based in Las Vegas working for ETC. Primarily supporting entertainment venues in Las Vegas, Josh also traveled the world supporting the EOS product line. He shifted to programming for various shows, including multiple Broadway national tours and Cirque du Soleil productions. Josh also spends much of his time working in the themed entertainment market, designing and programming brand experiences, including the Henry Ford, Kennedy Space Center, Museum of the Bible, and the Great Wolf Lodge. Josh is the lighting designer and programmer for multiple shows under Chris Angel's brand, including Mindfreak, Raw, and a joint venture with Dragone, a Mystica. Josh most recently designed Dragone's show in Riyadh, Tahal, a cultural experience in Saudi Arabia. Currently, Josh is designing and programming various immersive brand experiences throughout the US. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Yeah, thank you so much. Happy to be here.
It's good to see your face.
Yes, I know. It's been a long time since we've seen each other. So I think the last time was a awkward trip in wrapping up in Diria.
That's right. So we've actually never talked about your journey into lighting design. So what led you into your career in lighting?
I think like so many other people, it was something I did in high school. And it kind of shifted, it was one of those, oh, you can't possibly make a career out of this. It was a new thing to my parents, to my family. And being in South Carolina, I actually knew of North Carolina School of the Arts at the time and was recommended to go there actually for lighting design. And I actually went to UNCSA and graduated back in 2006 for lighting technology, which was a new program that they had created there. And didn't really understand, even when I was there, that was something that you could make into a real career, that like you could be supportive, you could have, you made money, you could actually travel the world and do things. But I also didn't know all the different facets that are a part of the career path that you could go on, working for a manufacturer or being in design, moving, everyone always talks about you move to New York City. And that was something that I knew that I didn't want to do. But I was actually really interested more in the technology 20 years ago than I was the design side. So that's why I actually, after school, I went on tour for a little bit, but then I ended up going and working for ETC here in Las Vegas because I was interested in the technology and interested in working for a good company.
It's so funny that you mention how you didn't actually know that this could be a career, because I think we hear that really, really often from people. And I think that's one of the really wonderful things about this podcast is that we try to let people know what options they actually have. Did you have maybe like a mentor or a person who kind of modeled for you what a lighting career could look like in your early days?
Yeah, I'd say that I have a few. It really depends on if we're talking, whether it's design or technology or the manufacturing side. I think early on, as a student and as a young career professional, my mentor was Eric Rimes, who is at UNCSA teaching lighting technology. I think, I found at ETC it was Anne Valentino. She had been in the business, and she is knows everything about control products. And each one of these people kind of take you under their wing, right? And they teach you all of the things that they hope you don't have to go through some of those struggles to learn, like they probably did. I think, but in the end, it's finding someone that you can relate to and finding someone that ultimately is a good human that you want to surround yourself with. And there are so many of those people out there. It just, you have to ask.
Mm. Mm. In your teaching days, um, when you look at the students or when you're going through the curriculum with them, is it clear who's going to make it and what's the kind of profile that
Oh, that's an awful question. No, of
like
course it's not. I mean, you'd think it would actually be pretty easy to tell, like, oh, this student's going to go places. But I think they all, because UNCSA is a conservatory school, they all want to be there. It's not like there's students that are there for a minor in lighting. They all want to do lighting. That is their passion. That is the only thing that they know. And they always end up leaving. And that was leaving with a job, I should say, not leaving, right? But that's the cool thing about the school, and what makes it unique is that they all have successful careers. Not everyone decides to stay in the entertainment business. I think, that's something that you don't really know until you leave school and you start working professionally. And it's okay not to do the same thing that you went to school for. That's one of the really important lessons that we teach, that we taught to the students, is that you can pivot at any time. If something's not making you happy, then you should change. You should make that change. And there's been plenty of students that are not in the business anymore. There's plenty of students that have gone on to other careers, and they're just as successful as that as they are in lighting. So, I mean, it's hard looking back and saying, oh, this student has so much success or so much potential, because they all have that potential. It's whether or not they can find that passion and that little gem that makes them happy, that gives them something to strive for.
That must have been really, really a full circle moment for you, returning to teach at UNCSA, having been a
Yeah,
student there. I can't imagine like how
yeah.
amazing that was. Did you find that you knew better what would prepare students for the real world, having been a student yourself there?
I'd say partially. One of the reasons I wanted to go there and teach was that with my job at ETC, I was a trainer for the EOS product line. And so I would travel around the US mostly, going to different colleges that had just purchased. And I would go to all of these random colleges and see just how little the students were being taught. And it was like, how do you have a program but you're not teaching what's out there right now? And so for me, getting to go back to the school, yeah, it was great because I knew how the school operated, but it was also really important because I knew the technology that was being used, and I had the connections to bring that technology to the school. And being able to actually have that in front of the students to learn, was the amazing part. They hadn't had access to certain people or certain pieces of equipment. And so much of what we do in lighting, especially the technology side, requires owning the equipment, which is virtually impossible for a public institution to do successfully,
mm,
unfortunately. So
mm.
partnering with manufacturers is, while somewhat taboo for a public university, is so important to be able to do.
Why is it taboo?
Um, uh, because it's state owned, they don't typically like to partner up with a manufacturer because that would show favoritism. So that's something that you have to kind of say anyone's welcome, right? That was something that the school that we were willing to let anyone come in and be a part of the institution, because the more manufacturers, the more people, the more likely the students were to get a job. And ultimately, we just wanted students to get the best education that they could and be successful when they leave the school. So,
And you've kind of played and danced in all the aspects of lighting, really, when you think about it, working on the technical side, on the training side, on the teaching side, and then being a designer, but also going through the depth and breadth of different kind of genres of entertainment
yes.
or, installations. So is there a particular, do you like to do it all, or is there something that you really enjoy the most of all
Um,
those realms of lighting?
uh, I think it's not necessarily always about the genre. A lot of it for me is sometimes it's about the people. So much of what we do, I work from my house, right? And getting to go out and do a show with essentially my friends and my family, that's the thing that I like. I'm very blessed now that I can choose like what show I get to do. And the nice thing about that is that it's typically shows that are with my friends. And I like that. I think that's why so many of us probably pick specific shows, is it, whether it's the people we work with or it's the content in the show, right? And the message that you're hopefully delivering within that show. I think it's neat that I have the opportunity to work in so many different markets. And that's what I like. It's, difficult to work in the themed experience world for me. Going and switching from doing a show like what we did in Saudi last year with Tur Hall, or a traditional Broadway musical, and programming that to doing a brand experience where there is no person that is going to run the show. The show is automated. The show just runs every 15 minutes, and there's a different thought process in everything we do in that. So that approach to that work is very different, just like it would be if you were going to a themed attraction somewhere. So the process in which, I approach different genres changes, but it doesn't mean that I like one more than the other. It just means that it's something that, sometimes they're less fun, one or the other, but they're always a challenge. I mean, especially now, everything is so complicated from a technology standpoint. But then everything is complicated because of logistics and just trying to get a show built and get it open.
Just going back a little bit for our listeners who might not know the difference between being a designer and being a programmer, could you explain your involvement in a project based on which role you're filling?
Yeah. I have a project coming up where I'm the programmer, and my role in the project is I'm reviewing. It's a themed experience. I'm a little bit more involved with the design side of it in terms of just reviewing paperwork. But I'm ultimately in charge of doing anything inside of the console. I'm doing all of the patch. We're also integrating some video elements into the lighting system, so I'll be helping with that, and ultimately working with the designer to put together, to program the show. Whereas if I am talking about a show, for instance, at the end of this year that I'm designing, then I'm involved from, 2 years ago working on creative meetings all the way up until we actually open that show. Whether that's doing drawings or plans, or, researching fixtures, meeting with clients, site visits, all of those things for that themed experience are a little bit more in depth in terms of probably from an architectural standpoint, but
Hmm.
they're pretty much aligned with what it would be if I was designing a theatrical production as well. It's just a different set of drawings, probably. But putting together all the cue list, putting together what the lighting plot, all of those typical and traditional facets of a lighting designer still exist. So
How often are you overlapping projects?
All the time.
Yeah.
At the school when I was teaching, I was also not only teaching, but I was also doing shows on top of that. And that was something that I think is really important for students to learn about, is also having the opportunity to see, your professor working professionally and involving them in whatever it is that you're doing, right? Like they would see drawings of, last year, Tur Hall, every time that we would have to do a review, I was having one of them, hey, look at this, and what did I mess up? And, having them take a look and see if they could find errors. So uh, I don't know. It's for me, it was one of those, involving them was important. But also there's a borderline burnout that you get from when you're doing too much. And I certainly found myself burned out because I was
Mm.
trying to tackle too many shows. And it certainly had an effect on, we always talk about, especially, post COVID mental health, right? And I knew I was burning myself out because I was taking on too much, but I also knew I was leaving the school and I was trying to set myself up for success in the freelance world. So there comes like a give and a take to that certainly was difficult, but not unobtainable. So, um,
Yeah, it's such a catch-22 because I think that one of the benefits of having a lecturer that is in the industry is that real life experience, and also being up to date and staying up to date with what the industry's doing as well. Because now that technology changes so fast and methods and desks get upgraded, and if you step out of the industry for 4 or 5 years, then you're behind, right? But then there's the balance of, oh, I can't really do both things full time, right?
it's so
So
true.
just
It's really hard. I mean, I had always set a goal of only being at the school for, I had originally said 3 to 5 years, because I didn't want to leave the industry and then, uh, not have those contacts, not have the experience, not be, I hate to use the term relevant, but not be able to actually still do the job of a designer or a programmer, because things do change so quick right now. And it's really difficult unless you're actively working to stay on top of it.
So what was it that made you decide to stay for 8 years?
COVID.
Yeah.
Certainly that had an effect, right? Um, so certainly, the school, like every other school, that was actually a fairly stable and safe place to be. We taught all the way through. It certainly wasn't easy, but it was an opportunity for me to, realign my personal life, and get that set before I came back out to Las Vegas with my wife. So.
mm. Do you have a favorite? Um, do you have a favorite job or lighting design that you've done?
Uh, I really like what we did with, there's a project in Nashville at the Grand Ole Opry, and we did their visitor experience in the front. And there's a couple of moments in that show that it's a roughly a 12-minute long show that talks about the importance of what the circle means to country music at the Grand Ole Opry. And it's such a super specific topic that
Mm.
if you don't know anything about country music, you don't understand. But in this 12-minute video, that is, it's a $1.5 million lighting rig installed in this 20 foot by 40 foot room, right? It is an amazing lighting system with video, projectors, hidden LCD screens, and you're watching this show and you're like, this is a visitor experience. Like, it teaches you so much about the content, but it's so entertaining. And one of the things I love about those types of shows is that the people that are going to that are not the same people that are going to a Broadway show or going to a
Mhm.
Cirque production. they are a very different audience, and you're hitting them in a way that is so artistic that that has a huge meaning to me that I really love. So
That's so
Yeah,
cool.
that's super cool. I really like and in that process, say for that gig and that process, like how long did that take to sort of put together, and how many people were designing that experience?
ooh. We had 3 lighting designers total. I programmed it as well. And then, I mean, there's a slew of production designers. I think we had about 4 or 5 weeks on site to put the show together. I mean, that doesn't count for however long it took to edit the video and the content and, find the videos. When you talk about archival and trying to find video archives that are more than 20 years old, that starts to become difficult for different institutions. So I mean, that was a huge part of their process. But I mean, it was kind of a last minute project for us, and that it happened, maybe I think it was December, and then we started install in April. And we worked all April all the way through middle to end of May to put that show together. And it runs every 15 minutes. There's a showing, right? Which is pretty cool. So, and then at nighttime, they actually take that room and they turn it into a lounge, and it's a VIP experience where you can meet the artists that are performing at the Opry that night in that room. So, I mean, it's a multi-purpose use experience, which is also, pretty cool too.
That is so cool. In terms of maintenance of that, is there a team there, or do you find that you have to go on site
No.
to kind of?
So they have some maintenance, right?
Mhm.
They do take care of some of that themselves. Most of these projects, when we do it with, so these are all under BRC Imagination Arts, and they're a company out of Burbank. And BRC typically utilizes Clearwing systems integration. And so on these projects, there'll typically be a contracted maintenance plan where Clearwing is coming out either quarterly or yearly to either inspect or do maintenance on the system. So, but they also have, I mean, because they have such a large facility and a large lighting system, they have their own techs that can do the maintenance on some of it.
So typically, when you finish a project, like you've installed it, that's it, you're done. You fly back out and wash your hands of it.
Normally, if we're talking themed experience, not all the time.
Mhm.
All of our projects we support for up to a year, remote. So we the way that they've designed the systems, Clearwing installs a remote monitoring computer for us. So I can log in if I needed to, and let's say that the client says, "Oh, hey, the time of day at 8 a.m. did not trigger today. Can you take a look at that?" And so we actually can remotely monitor and remotely log in and make those little changes from the house, from an airplane, from wherever. It doesn't really matter. Big changes we would fly out for, because it's a little bit harder to see. I mean, I've certainly looked at a Ring camera before and had to focus a moving light on a project remotely just to be able to, do it. But typically, it's pretty low key. On some of the other productions, I mean, once the show is open, the show is open. You don't make changes to it. That's pretty standard still. But a lot of these brand experiences will still tweak and make changes on them. So, which is stressful. Like, it's stressful to do that because I'm so afraid the entire time that I'm going to break it, right? Because you're doing it from in your computer and you never understand if you're doing, I mean, I know I'm doing the right thing, but I'm also like, I can't check it, and I just want to check it and make sure that it works, and I can't do that. And so you're like, well, if I don't hear anything, I guess it worked.
And now a note from our sponsor.
The Theatre Art Live podcast is proud to be sponsored by ClearCom. ClearCom is the leader in voice communications for theatre and the performing arts. Call your cues with the simplicity and elegance of ClearCom Intercom solutions. You can find them at clearcom.com. Go check them out.
It's I don't have that same experience, but often I'll come up to the kitchen table and my husband's dialed into some automation system on one part of the planet, be it in China or
Yeah. It's
or they-
wild. It's wild that we can do that now, right? I
Yeah,
mean, it's pretty cool, but it's crazy. So
it is absolutely crazy. Going back to Kat's point about stacking projects up, how do you prioritize, or how do you choose projects, or how do you find work? I think a lot of people are like, well, he's very successful and he's just picking up work everywhere, and like, how does that work for you? Are you chasing it? Are you connecting with people regularly? How do you keep employed as a freelancer?
okay. So I mean, let's use the example of my relationship with you, Anna. Um I'm here because we did a Mystica together, right? So that's how we first met. And that was a huge risk for, I think, for everyone, in terms of it was a joint venture that I was not making what my standard rate would have been, but I was really passionate about having the opportunity to work with Franco, right? So I took, essentially it felt like a cut at the time, but I really wanted to work under Franco, right? And so I had that opportunity to do that. So why would I give that up? So sometimes you have to weigh the pros and cons of the situation. And if you're trying to align yourself into kind of a different, whether it's a different genre or with a different group, you're probably going to have to make some sacrifices. It You got to be careful though, right? It's something that we always talk about with the students when they're graduating. You don't want to take work away from people because you're coming in and saying, "Oh, well, I can do it for 20% of the cost," right? That's never something that you want to do. But you may have to make sacrifices in what are, in your own personal contract, or your own maybe your rate, simply because you want to line yourself up with new people, right? There's plenty of shows that I could say that I've probably done that, allowed me to meet people. I'm very thankful that now I have a huge network of friends, and I can call them up and say, "Hey, is there any work?" But also, I mean, if you're good to people, if you're a good human, and you do what you've committed to doing, the work comes to you. So just taking care of others, I think sometimes is what I would say is the most important thing. Nobody wants to work with someone that's not fun. Nobody wants to work with someone that isn't going to take care of them, so you get work because you're a good human at the end of the day, right? Certainly skill and all of those things play a factor into it. But making sure that you're treating people the right way is, I think, so important in this industry. So,
Absolutely. What would you say are like the pros and cons of being completely freelance?
oh, okay. So,
Question.
huh. So huge pro, you have lots of free time.
Hmm.
Huge con, you have lots of free time. Um, that's been really hard for me. That's been the biggest struggle, is adjusting to the time. Like, I'm coming off of having a couple of months off, which has been great. I love it. I'm getting to spend time with, my daughter and being home. And I'm about to go back on the road for 4 or 5 months doing shows. But like, that time adjustment that is, for me, that's a pro and a con. It's really tough for me to be doing nothing for so long when you're used to just constantly, spinning the tires. Um, I think a big pro for me is getting to have the opportunity to really pick shows that I care about.
Hmm.
And if I want to do a show now, I actually can do it Whereas when I was at the school or when I was at ETC, it was really hard for me to say yes to a show because I knew it would have some type of ramification on me or on students or on the company, right? Whatever that was. So now having the ability to just, yeah, let's do it is really cool. Um, Obviously, the side of freelance that is really hard is the fact that you have to take care of it, all of your health and benefits. So that's a huge part of that's a con of freelance. I think it's a huge part of uh, why I'm thankful that my wife has a job that can supply us with health insurance, right? So that's a huge part of it. But I mean, in some ways, it doesn't feel like I'm freelance because I feel like I'm still doing so many of the things that I always did, whether I was teaching at the school or I was working at ETC, right? And yeah, it's freelance, but I don't really feel that way about it. I guess right now it's just I have more time. I'm not doing a 9 to 5 on top of the freelance that I've always done. So I feel a whole lot less stress about it, which has been, I think, something really good for me.
What do you like to
So,
do in your free time?
well, I like to bike. So where we moved to in Las Vegas, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of miles of biking here to do. We go on hikes on the weekend. Almost every weekend we can. We're typically out hiking. Um, so we're doing that. I mean, I'm really up for anything, but it's also really hard because uh, it's difficult to pick up a hobby now because it's like, okay, well, if I pick up something, am I going to be able to do it wherever I go, what city I'm in, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
thinking about when I'm in Atlanta for 2 months this year, should I buy a case to put my bike in and take a bike to Atlanta so I can ride a bike in Atlanta in my free time? And then I'm thinking to myself, am I going to have free time? I mean, I'm probably not going to have any free time to go and bike every day. So, it's also enjoying it while I'm here, knowing that once I'm out on the road, I'm probably not going to have a chance to do much. So,
Mm. I was going to say, assuming that your wife also has like a full time responsibility, right? So that can help the balance of your freelance work as a family unit. Is that how it kind of works for you?
yes and no. I mean, I think for sure she recently graduated getting an MFA. So, I mean, there's student loans that are associated with that she has to take care of. So certainly that's the priority is taking care of that. I mean, that's the weird thing is I feel sometimes, she'll go off to work at, 8 a.m. and I go and I go exercise in the morning and I come home and I'll check emails and then I'll cook dinner or I'll do whatever around the house. And then she comes home and I'm like, man, I did nothing today. Like, that's a really hard it's so weird because she's gone off and she's done all these things at work, and I'm in the same place that she left in the morning when she got home at the end of the day. So, but we try to schedule stuff, like, we're trying to figure out vacations, and that is by far, I think, if you wanna talk about pro and con, that to me is something I haven't quite figured out
Hmm.
because it's hard right now. My schedule with some of these shows, the shows are just shifting back and forth. Well, they just keep shifting back. There's no fourth. Um,
Sorry.
yeah. So it's hard because like we want to go on a family vacation, but I'm pretty sure that the week that we've picked now that's the week that the show's going to move into. So how do you kind of battle that and plan? That becomes really hard. And I think also it just means that you have to have more boundaries, right? Which is not impossible, but it just means you got to have some very clear boundaries. So, and I've learned most people are okay with that. You know, if you're very honest, like, hey, I have this immovable thing and I'm going to go do it. I need to leave for 6 days and then I'll come back. Some companies are okay with that because they actually get that now. So
Yeah, I think there's a lot of more tolerance and understanding. I think one of the things I've noticed post-pandemic, people are less inclined to move to another location to sell this for a job or not have that work-life balance that they've set up. And I think this is probably a good thing because probably the whole industry is a little bit unconscious about how much they until they like, oh, I could just like have time off and be in the pandemic and this is an interesting experience for me. And then they don't want to go back to working the hours that we did. I think that's actually really healthy. I mean, we should never glorify, you know, doing 16-hour days, 6 days a week if that's, if you have to do it in the production week and fine, but like to do it as a regular thing, especially when you're a partner and a parent and all of those sort of things, something's got to give, right?
something has to give. I mean, and that's why you get burnout, right? That's why people become unhappy. And I mean, it's one of those like, we'll talk a lot about the 10 out of 12, right? And I don't have no issue with the 10 out of 12. I understand it's a long day, but we're also not doing that for 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 3, 4, 5 months straight, right? Ideally, I hope no one's doing that, right? But for 2 weeks, I totally get that. We when we go off and we do our projects with BRC or with other clients, it's typically we work 6 days a week. But they've asked us, hey, would you rather have a 5 day work week or a 6 day work week? I'd rather have a 6 day work week. I would rather get the show wrapped up, keep that momentum going as much as I can, because I don't know what I would do with those 2 days off. One day off for me is
Especially if
good.
you're away from home or anything
Yeah,
like that,
yeah.
right?
If I was
Yeah.
home doing a show here in Las Vegas, give me a 5 day week. But 6 day week from, when I'm traveling, I'd rather do that because it just means that I get to get back to my house quicker. So
Yeah, but that's the important thing, right? Is asking that question, is asking, do you want the 5 day week? And maybe it takes a little bit longer, or do you want the 6 day week? And then you get to go home sooner. Like the fact that we're even asking that question
that's a huge
is
deal.
a huge deal for
Yeah,
work-life balance. It's really cool.
yeah, yeah, indeed.
But I also think too that like people have got different velocities or cadences at which they can work too, right? And I think that's the hard thing when you're building a team is the expectation that some people, if they're particularly creative, they've got their, I understand having worked with creative for such a long time, they can't do 12 hours of creative work. Like it's got to, there's a period of time where you can be creative and then you can be functional and blah, blah, blah. But it all comes in cycles. And then there's young, eager production people that can smash out a 16-hour day and still have a beer at the end of it and be cheery, right? Like it's, everybody's different. And I think that's the hard thing when you're building teams and then building a schedule and trying to maintain that is to cater for all of that. But that's why people need to advocate for their needs and their time and try and find the best solution. Because, like you said, happy team, you get a great show, right? I think that's
That's
the
really
relationship
important.
and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, what's interesting is that I don't think enough people feel comfortable to ask the questions though, right? I think that there's a sense of like if I ask this, then they may not ask me to come back,
Yeah.
right?
But you can also see at 10 o'clock at night and you look around, everybody's
Oh,
fading. Like,
yeah. Yeah.
guys,
Are
let's
you
go home
Yeah.
because we're not doing anything good here right now.
Well, and that's the thing. At some point, there's a loss of progress, and you're just spinning wheels, and it's not actually the car's not moving, right? So why not take care of your team? And I'm thankful that the shows and the companies I'm working with are allowing that to happen, that they see the burnout, right? They see, oh yeah, you guys are like anxiety is high right now. What can we do to support you? So I think that's the important thing is having companies that now acknowledge the fact that the mental health of the employees are, you know, in some ways tied to the success of the show. So
we always finish with the same similar question, so we're going to do that now with you, Josh. What's the most favorite thing about your job or the industry as a whole?
probably the people, right? The people and the places. I'm thankful that I get to go to whatever random city, and not all of them are lovely, by the way. But I'm thankful that I get to go and do these experiences with people that I don't just consider friends, but many of whom that I consider family. I'm thankful that I get to have a job where I feel like some days I'm just hanging out, right? And I think that's the cool thing, is that if you can line yourself up with that, like, I love it. I love that I can go to a random city and I can call a friend that I know that lives there. Your network of people is, I think, the best part of all of this. So
It's always nice knowing wherever you go that there's going to be either someone to have a beer with or a couch to
yeah,
crash on. Yeah, definitely.
yes,
It's
absolutely, absolutely. So especially, I feel like now more than ever, coming out of, I know we're on the years past COVID now, but it's like we all isolated for so long that now it's like, hey, let's go do something. We still want to do something. So
We're still in
yeah,
recovery.
yeah.
yeah.
What was it? It was 4 years ago. It just happened? I think it was yesterday or the day before. And that, to me, I was like, was it really only 4 years ago? Like,
Yeah, speak for yourself,
yeah,
because here in Asia, it was like much longer
yeah.
than
Well,
America.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, to
I was
me,
still.
I can't believe it's been 4 years.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So, Josh, our final question for you. If you could change one thing about your job or about the industry as a whole, what would it be?
Phew.
This is the tricky one.
Yeah, it's hard. Um, I wish I could call a friend on that one. That's hard. 'Cause part of me, part of me wants to say I want to take it back to the school, and I want to say, how important education is and how important it is for the students to have an opportunity um, to have that education. I think the thing that I would say is the accessibility of that.
Yes.
I think the accessibility is such a huge issue, whether it's a student trying to get into a school and being able to afford a school, or someone being able to afford going to a summer workshop, someone being able to afford to move to Los Angeles after they graduate from school, right? The accessibility of the industry and where some of the markets are that exist for the industry, I think are really problematic. And I don't think enough companies uh, can and understand how hard it is for a young student that just graduated, how difficult that is to move, right? Or how difficult it is to even get into school and being able to afford it, and the stresses that come with that, right? So I would say
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Josh,
Yeah.
for
Thank
joining us on the
you.
Fit podcast. Wonderful to have you and talk a little bit about your work and life.
Yes. Thank you. It was a pleasure. It's so good to be here.
Theater at Life is a global media site for entertainment. Memberships start at only $38 per year. You can have unlimited access to our daily published articles, including entertainment news and the writings of active industry professionals, ensuring that you are always up to date on the global happenings in the world of entertainment. Become a part of the international entertainment community and join us now at www.theaterartlife.com.